In this episode of VCast Studio with Naveen Naqvi.
Heroes practice purpose, and that's what differentiates them. I feel some of us women, we ride on the shoulders of the women who started the movement for women's rights in Pakistan. What I find the most unique opportunity in Pakistan are the young people in Pakistan. I think young people in Pakistan have so much to give, and as an older generation, it is our responsibility to provide them with those opportunities for self-realization. Sometimes it's very good to do very, short-term, jazzy projects, but for that project to have a longer-term impact, to be sustainable, that's a different road, and that's the road that Pathfinder takes.
Hello and welcome to VCast Studio with Naveen Naqvi. Today we have in the studio with us Dr. Tabinda Sarosh. She is the Interim CEO of Pathfinder International. What makes Tabinda remarkable is she is the first non-US based CEO of Pathfinder International, leading the organization in 20 countries. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you, Naveen. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you here. Tabinda, we want to start a little bit with talking to you about how you started off. And I do believe that you began as a medical student. So what influenced your decision to go to Dow Medical College?
Thank you. So yes, Dow, coming to Dow was, I think, a journey on its own. I had not grown up in Pakistan. I had grown up in China and had decided that, after taking pre-medical and in my high school, I had decided to come to a Pakistani university to study.
What life lessons did you gather from there?
When you situate yourself in Dow, you don't just situate yourself in that academic institution, you also situate yourself in its affiliated hospital, which is the Civil Hospital Karachi. Civil Hospital Karachi caters not just to the underprivileged populations in Karachi, but all around the country, particularly, of course, within the province of Sindh and even Balochistan. And the people who access this hospital are the marginalized communities. They're the people who are underprivileged when it comes to socioeconomic status in the society. And learning that firsthand from third year onwards during clinical rounds, it's an eye-opening and humbling experience. You get to understand what are the needs of the women and patients in general beyond just care, and how do they make ends meet. Of course, there were always issues of availability of commodities, availability of the right equipment. Sometimes there would be issues with generators. I have assisted surgeries with candlelight on,
Oh, wow.
in an operation theater. So that was, as I said, it was eye-opening for me. It brought me closer to that client and doctor interaction and the environment around it. I think that's what had already started building my mindset around health systems, that, what does it entail? Firstly, a client being with a doctor, but then what other elements need to be in place in a health system, to meet the requirements of the patient. So what I did, other than being a medical student at Dow, I also used to work at Patient Welfare Association. This was a student-run voluntary organization that had a blood bank that used to arrange for blood transfusions for the patients. It had a drug bank which used to arrange for medicines, and the students used to do the fundraising drives,
Right.
Throughout the year. So this kind of made me understand that we needed to supplement and complement
Right.
what already was in the systems. Otherwise, the systems would not be able to withstand it.
So working with marginalized people in the beginning of your, or rather in student life and then carrying on in your career, is that what has influenced this quote that we find on the Pathfinder website, that I am able to channel my experience as a feminist and an activist to improve the lives of women and girls? Because you mentioned that you worked with women, you worked with the marginalized. So we'd love to hear more about your reflections on movement building. How important is grassroots organization?
Just a heads up here that I actually am a movement child. And in so way, it's a part of nature and nurture for me. Both my parents, have been activists for freedom of human rights in the country, freedom of expression. And my mother has been a member of Women Action Forum in Pakistan since before my birth, Actually, Women Action Forum actually came into being in the 1980s, but the movement had started, right? And Mama was one of the women rights activists who had, come together to form the Women Action Forum. Women Action Forum later on went on to activate against some of the most oppressive laws and policies in the country around women's bodily autonomy. So I guess that was something that I got to see firsthand at home. Baba was the president of the Pakistan Federal Union of Journalists, so to be able to do that and to have that in your environment, uncles, aunties, and talking about that, I think that formed the basis of it. In Dow, of course, I got that practical interaction on the intersections of social justice and health,
Right.
But later on, I have to say, where was that feminism actually concretized? It was a local organization, very much homegrown, Shirkatgah. Shirkatgah is a feminist collective, and I was the director at Shirkatgah for 5 years for women's reproductive and bodily rights. And that, combined with, of course, the clinical background I had, that experience really, really kind of, sealed the deal for me on understanding that this is the issue here is so much larger. It's so much larger than just providing medicines to a patient at the time. It's a social issue. It's an issue of justice. It's also a global issue which connects to the local issue. And,
sure. There are systemic issues at play here.
Absolutely. There are systemic issues. There are issues that have been developing over years, in fact, generations, and the work is, yes, we need to be aware of the short-term measures we can take, but what is the long-term vision over here? And how do we actually take forward the women's rights agenda while situating them in a peaceful society? And in peaceful society, we engage with men, who are allies for women. We engage with local communities, organizations, decision makers, and then we, negotiate with those decision makers. And that's what grassroots organizations can do.
Yes.
And Pathfinder is an international NGO, and we support grassroots movements and local organizations in all the countries we work, because the solutions are always with the local communities, because they're the ones who face them on a daily basis. And these solutions are intersectional. These solutions need to be based on the contextual needs of those communities, which include poverty, which include a woman's need to feed her children, which include a woman's need to educate her children, but then which also include that woman to realize her own life potential, and how she moves forward and situates herself as the citizen of this planet.
Let's talk a little bit about your personal career.
Sure.
Take us through your first, your appointment with Pathfinder as the country director. That was your first appointment?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us, what did it represent for you, Pathfinder, globally, that you wanted to be part of this organization?
Being the country director for Pathfinder, and that was 6 years of work that I did. I was based out of Karachi, and it was, as a practitioner, a coming of age sort of an experience for me at a personal level, because we were working very closely with the provincial governments. Devolution had happened in Pakistan by them, and so many powers and, the ability to budget for the provinces had come back to the provinces, right? And that meant that we had a beautiful opportunity to work in each province according to the needs of the province, to strengthen the systems, optimize them to serve the women and girls better. And when I say serve women and girls better, to narrow it down, this was maternal health. This was family planning, especially post-pregnancy family planning. And this was around work around age of marriage. This was also work around access to services, access to multi-sectoral recourses, towards situations that women and girls often find themselves in, gender-based violence being one of them. I'm really super, super grateful at that time to the leadership in Pathfinder that, gave me the space to run with my vision. Pathfinder in Pakistan before that had largely been known as a family planning organization, And I think my journey, the journey I had covered by then, I wanted to see more linkages. I wanted to understand what does family planning mean to a woman in a climate affected area. I wanted to understand what does it mean to an urban woman, a woman who's tech savvy, who's like a Karachiite maybe, and exposed to different facets of society, and yet the women who are so much in need in the more remote rural areas of Pakistan. So that was important, and I got the space in Pathfinder to actually implement programs. Now there's a difference here. The difference is that you can advocate all you want for intersections. Designing programs is an actual implementation of programs. That's a whole different area where you need to be with the communities to understand their multidimensional needs. One thing that had attracted me to Pathfinder is that Pathfinder around a decade and a half ago had already started programming on population health and environment. This was done in Africa around Lake Victoria, Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya. And those linkages at the field level, at the actual implementation sites were already being made.
One thing I want to go back to is that you said it was the solutions that are top down and bottom up. There's usually a divide in there. Do you think that you have been able to somehow at Pathfinder bridge that gap?
That's a very great question, Naveen. So Pathfinder works at multiple levels of governance and systems. This starts, right from gaining insight and evidence and co-creating with the communities. And when I say co-creating, frankly, giving the driver's seat to the communities. So for example, very recently in our climate resilience programs in Pakistan, Bangladesh, it's the communities who identify their issues, and frankly, they have the solutions. They also identify the solutions. And we at that time become the facilitators of that creation of a solution. And eventually, of course, the change that follows. And then comes a community's engagement with the systems. Are the communities engaging with the systems that have been made based on their choice, right? And because in the government comes into being through people's choice, and how people interact with the systems, how accessible those systems are to them, what does it entail for them to access those systems? It could be the transport. It could be just lack of awareness. Does this service even exist? Who do I go to? Where do I go to? What does a woman and a girl think, especially in contexts like ours, where women have restricted mobilities, right? They do not have a lot of exposure in the society. Where do they go? So that is one level. And then health management or systems management itself, to understand what the systems can provide, but also to understand what are the limitations of the system. And that's where the concept of resilience comes in. How can we make our systems resilient to that demand, overwhelming demand, in the communities? And then the next layer is, of course, policy making, and both feed on each other. So this top-down and bottom-up approach would feed onto each other. You cannot make policies in vacuum. The policies have to be responsive to the needs of the communities, to the needs of the women. And that's when you'll be able to implement them, because policies will result in actions. They will result in changes at the systems level. And those changes or those actions, will they be availed by the women and girls? Are they available? Are they accessible? Are they affordable? These are some of the things that we work in. And I believe both are important, because both approaches, they feed on each other.
Agreed. An ideal module, I would say. Now, you were talking about how Pathfinder was working in Africa and there are some solutions. I wonder, what do you think distinguishes Pakistan from the rest of the world, given that Pathfinder works in multiple territories?
Many of the countries in the global south actually follow a similar trajectory. Why? Because the needs are the same, right? The poverty levels, the level of development at which many of the countries in global south find themselves, the patriarchy in many of the societies that we work in, and of course this urban-rural divide, increase in wealth gap, and attitudes towards women and girls. All of them, when you take when you zoom out and you take a bird's eye view of it, frankly, many of the problems are same. And now, many of the problems also transcend borders. So, for example, climate change. Climate change will not just stay in Pakistan, right?
Of course.
In fact, exactly. Pakistan is one of the countries who don't have a significant carbon footprint, but yet is suffering from the effects of climate change.
A lot of the countries that don't, in fact, contribute so much are impacted the most.
Absolutely.
When we talk about challenging times, this is, of course, a global phenomenon. But how specifically in Pakistan is Pathfinder thinking about climate change?
So, Pakistan is one of the top 10 countries in the entire world that are going to be affected by climate change. That in itself is a comment which makes one pause. We also know that women and girls are going to be on the front lines of it. Why? By simple deduction, already, in a context where women and girls find it hard to access services, times of crisis that are triggered by climate change is going to increase their vulnerability, which means that is going to increase their, the threat to their accessing services, which can be health, education, economic empowerment, etc. So when we talk about solutions for climate change in Pakistan, that has to happen with women and girls at the same time. What we do see in Pakistan is this immense receptivity by the Ministry of Climate Change to include women as a major player in the dialogues and action that's going to come forward. So very recently, Pathfinder actually supported the Ministry of Climate Change to hold an Asia-Pacific dialogue of parliamentarians in Pakistan to work on this and to come to commitments that are focused on the role of women and green economy. And what does that mean? That means working with women at the community level. So in Pakistan, for example, women and communities through Pathfinder work have been replenishing mangroves in the areas of Badin and Thatta. They've also been working in Tharparkar to come up with solutions around food management, water management, nutrition plans, and multi-sectoral services. Working with communities also means enabling their leadership and their voices. So more than 800 women champions, women climate champions, are right now working in our communities, building solutions that are local, affordable, accessible. Pandemics, epidemics, they don't see borders, They transcend borders. So it's a matter of One Health. It's a matter of climate change and global health security. You saw when COVID-19 happened. That was not contained to one country, right? Sure. This was So some of the areas that we are talking about are One Health areas, and the solutions that you need are global health solutions, which will, of course, be contextualized to different countries. Zooming back into Pakistan, I think Pakistan is very unique also. The history of Pakistan, the political history, the economic history, how the people of different languages and cultures are living in this country, and building systems according to their needs. I think it has been very unique. And what I find the most unique opportunity in Pakistan are the young people in Pakistan. If you look at the demographic stats from Pakistan, you will see a huge demographic bulge, and that is your population, which is the young people. And it fills my heart with joy, but it also fills my heart with this responsibility, sense of responsibility that we need to be creating enabling spaces for this huge potential population that can be the change maker, that will take Pakistan forward in the coming days. So it's an opportunity, but it is also something that can turn into a threat, if you do not respond to the needs of the young people. So what are the needs of the young people? But in countries like ours, employment, is an area where we need to be creating opportunities for young people to be employed in a dignified manner. Otherwise, another trend that we see in Pakistan is brain drain, right? Pakistan continues to lose talent.
Let's talk about Pathfinder now.
Yeah, sure.
What can you tell us about the organization, just briefly, in terms of its history and the global presence?
Sure. Pathfinder is an organization that has worked for women's reproductive health, maternal health, child health for a long time. It came into being in 1957 and has been programming in the field, and we have programmed in more than 120 countries across the world. Currently, our programs are in 20 countries in Asia and Africa. And over the time, Pathfinder's programming have been agile and responsive to the cognizance of the changing needs of women, So when you talk about family planning, in the communities, it's impossible not to talk about access, not to talk about affordability. And then what does it mean in the context of climate change? So Pathfinder works on the intersections of climate, health systems resilience, women's health, protection from gender-based violence, and the well-being of the entire planet itself. Why do I say that? When you look at our own rural areas, women are the ones who also work in the fields, right? They're in touch with agriculture. They also tend to the animals in the field. And these animals, the produce from our farms and fields, they're all a part of our ecosystem. And women and girls are playing a huge role as they engage with all these elements of the ecosystem. They're the custodians of our environment in so many ways. They have local solutions, traditional history of how, things were done. So what Pathfinder does is that we work with the communities to extract all of that out, and then build solutions, build evidence around that, and then work with the government to scale it up, to make it sustainable. Sometimes it's very good to do very, short-term, jazzy projects, but for that project to have a longer-term impact, to be sustainable, that's a different road, and that's the road that Pathfinder takes.
That's a key word there, sustainable solutions. Yeah. From the outside looking in, how do you see your appointment as the first non-US based interim CEO?
So, firstly, being at Pathfinder is frankly being at home, second thing is that Pathfinder is very fortunate to have a great board. Our board is a diverse board, and they're also very forward-looking. And one of the good things about that is that very early on, we realized at Pathfinder that if we are implementing in the field, our leadership and our decision making also needs to be in the field. So right now, for example, being based in Karachi, and Pathfinder's president right now for Africa is based in Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso. Our president for Asia is based out of Cairo, Egypt. So when we go out, open the doors of our houses, we would step into what was the field,
Sure.
and to be in connection with the field every day. That was mandatory, and I think Pathfinder was very forward looking in understanding that that needs to happen now. And of course, localization of development, now that is a global movement, not just in public health, but in other arenas of development as well. Solutions need to be developed and decision making needs to happen where the problems are, or the problems that you're trying to co-solve with the communities. So that is what Pathfinder is committed to in all our programs. And that does not, what makes us unique, let's just say, is our legacy of global standards of quality, that we have gathered from our experience of decades, operational excellence, and we combine our global systems with our presence and insights from the community, and try to come up with solutions that are made in conjunction with local partners. So Pathfinder's country offices all over the world, we have local partners. These are community-based organizations. These are also private sector partners, NGOs, and other academics, universities, etc., and co-creating the solution with them.
And you being on the ground is what makes your contribution valuable.
Absolutely.
What
because
sorry,
no,
please
go
continue.
ahead. It's just that development, cannot happen if you are remotely placed from the realities
Sure.
of the field.
Yeah, you need to be working on the ground to be hands-on.
Yeah.
From your experience, what are the prevailing public health crises for developing countries today, not specific to Pakistan, but around the area that you were talking about, Africa?
I'll start with women and girls because that's been the backbone of my work. That's the core of my work, and of course, women and girls are half the population of the planet, right?
Yes.
And not only that, they're also mothers, and they are the custodian of the health of a family, of the well-being of the family, and I think a mother's, a woman's, a girl's well-being, her ability to be resilient in this current time of climate change, crisis, other conflicts, etc., is key. And that too cannot happen if we do not address other areas of her life that contribute to her attaining full potential in life. So, for example, I would talk about the Pakistan program, since we're sitting in Pakistan right now, is that very recently, through some of our work, we were able to work with women not just on health access, but on social entrepreneurship and small businesses that women can lead. And very recently, our work in Pakistan resulted in women becoming part of the Rural Chamber of Commerce in Pakistan. So that is one thing. That is, I think these are the three main areas that need to be at the forefront when we talk about women and girls' well-being, their health, especially their reproductive health, their resilience to climate, and their access to opportunities that help them fulfill their potential as human beings. Having said that, this cannot be done in silos. This has to be done in partnership with the men in the communities, with the young people in the communities, the leaders in the communities.
Men are allies.
Yeah, absolutely. There are allies. What's the family, right? I mean, in many countries that we work, and of course in cultures generally, family is the unit of a society, and a family is made with a man and a woman in their partnership, interspousal communication, very important, and planning for the future in the family. And then, of course, yourself also. Yeah.
How would you articulate the general state of sexual and reproductive health and women's health in Pakistan?
Overall, when we look at the indicators in Pakistan, they're not always happy indicators, Naveen. While we have made improvements in the maternal mortality rates, our contraception prevalence rate, it has actually gone down.
Yeah.
In addition to that, you might have seen the report from the World Economic Forum, where, when it comes to women development, Pakistan ranks very low. In fact, it is the second last in the list, So these are not necessarily indicators that will make one happy. But at the same time, I'm very positive about change. And one of the reasons I'm positive is also how the information, or let's just say how social media and information technology is engaging with Pakistan right now and the young people in Pakistan. And so much information that was in the previous days not available to young people, it is now available. Of course, at the same time, it needs to be balanced to the services that need to be present also. Information creates demand. Awareness creates demand. And that demand has to be balanced by the supply side, which means do they have, if, for example, you can motivate a young person to do a master's in aeronautics, for example, but do you have the means to fulfill that demand or enable that young person to pursue that dream? So, and for a woman, you could tell a woman that, these are the different options that are available to you. For example, you do not need to get married in school. And, so in Pakistan, as you know, we do have a law around which is 18 years in Sindh and in other provinces. In many of the countries, Pathfinder has worked on age of marriage, including Egypt. And so you can say that to her, but at the same time, you also need to be then providing potential opportunities to those girls for education, for employment, and to feel safe at workplace also. In Egypt, we have a wonderful, very exciting project, which is the Women Economic and Social Empowerment Project, in which we are actually working with private sector partners, 51 organizations in total, to create safe working environment for women, right? Because women are a huge part of the labor force. And given, of course, the economic constraints, the rising inflation in countries like ours, many families, women and men both are working. But women's challenges at workplaces are so different from men's challenges.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Let's talk about you now.
Sure.
What can you tell us about your style of leadership?
So, whenever I talk about my style of leadership, I feel very humbled. It's one thing to be called a leader. It's another thing to be actually exercising that. And I think it's a very humbling experience for me. But I would like to start by saying that I'm a learner and I learn from my teams on a daily basis. So co-creation is very much my leadership style. Having said that, I also believe that as a woman, I feel that I also have a responsibility, to create channels of growth for the other women and young people in all the contexts that I work in Pakistan, beyond Pakistan. That's important.
Speaking of Pakistan, challenging times, I feel like I want to say, when wasn't it a challenging time for Pakistan? Because it's a young country. How do you keep your team motivated in these challenging times in Pakistan?
Yeah. As you said, it's a young country, and many of the countries in Global South, Naveen, are young countries,
yes.
Right? We are all, many of us, not all, sorry about that, are in a post-colonial context,
Correct.
Right? And in many of our countries, colonialism prevailed for more than 2-3 centuries. And that's a generational thing, and countries coming of age, countries now recognizing their own, potential in the global development arena, working for their people. That is something that's happening in many countries at the same time. So I don't think it's unique to Pakistan, but at the same time, there are some things that are very unique to Pakistan. And yes, I want to be very cognizant of the unique challenges young people are facing over here. So, and everybody in work, especially in terms of working for women's health and women's reproductive health. That in itself is an act of courage. And, to be working on women's reproductive health. And I think from courage, we draw inspiration. So that sometimes becomes the pivotal point in that motivational journey, that what you're doing is courageous, it's unique, what you're doing is for the benefit of the mankind, this climate, so being mission-centered, being mission-focused is very important. And for the teams, especially in non-profit work like ours, it's an important part of it. But also around hope. So one of the things that Pathfinder does is to exchange best practices from country to country. You're not alone in this. You're not alone. These are some of the things that you have to create opportunities. You have to be very mindful and conscious about it as a part of your leadership commitment. So one of the things that Pathfinder has pioneered in this space is the country-led strategy. And through the country-led strategy, we have, engaged more with our practitioners in the global south, try to provide them voice, but then also to provide them with the budgets, funds, resources, to be able to design their own solutions and come up with their own ideas. We also have an innovation fund in Pathfinder, which promotes innovative thinking and innovative programming. So that's a big part of it.
I can hear the pride in your voice, and it makes me want to ask you, how does it feel to lead a global organization, Pakistan?
It feels wonderful, but also, honestly speaking, it's daunting. Right? It's a responsibility because it's a mission-focused organization, and staying true to our mission is very important to us. At the same time, we find ourselves right now in very different, novel times, and this phase is stuck right after COVID, the novel times. And COVID was one of the most recent and one of the first events, pan-global events that kind of gave us all an opportunity to see that how fragile we are, and how adaptable we need to be, how agile we need to be.
Looking back at your life and your career, I'm a great believer in experiential knowledge.
Yeah.
What would you say is what you are able to achieve only from experience?
Everything. I mean, I grew up in a household where I had a lot of access to knowledge, books all around me, interesting conversations, but experiencing them on your own is completely different. And I think that also goes for all of us. And for that to have a learning mind, to have an open eye and an open heart is very important. I mean, at the end of the day, what is our primary identity on this planet? We are humans. We are part of this ecosystem, and that brings humility. That brings humility to approach life with humility and purpose. Something that I always say is that heroes practice purpose, and that's what differentiates them.
You are now in a leadership position, a very important leadership position. What changed for you once you came into that role?
So once again, I would go back to humility. That's what changed for me. To be, to always know that, yes, you might know a lot, but you still know very little. And this is a lifetime of learning. And to be able to take risks, to be able to fail forward, to be able to sometimes challenge and disrupt, the traditional ways of working, to be able to create new ways of working, to be able to reinvent organizations as they face a new reality in the century. That's what changed for me.
And what would you say are your core principles that you've held on to throughout your career?
Core principle for me is always justice. To be able to apply a justice lens to every situation in your life, be that gender, be that a class issue, race, work. Justice is very important for me. But at the same time, some of the values, for example, that we have at Pathfinder, respect and courage, they're important. To be able to listen to all points of view and to be able to make a decision while you're in the eye of the storm, I think that is a principle that I live by. You have to be able to be receptive to everybody's views. And yes, of course, in leadership positions, you have to make the decision. And one thing, by the way, I do feel women have absolutely wonderful executive skills. It's just that not always do they get a chance to practice them, but their executive skills are based on the ideologies of peace, collaboration, because they're nurturers, so it comes naturally for them. So that is also something that has played a big role in how I have evolved, I guess. Yeah.
Let's talk about men as allies. We broached that subject a little bit. What would be your advice to young men coming into the workplace about how they can enable women make the space that they need to grow?
Yeah. So I'm a mother of a daughter and a son, and I have a lot of men in my team also. Currently, Pathfinder's global workforce is 57% women, by the way.
Awesome.
But we also work with a lot of men. And you see, no solution is possible without the involvement of men and women, boys and girls together. Solutions cannot be made in a bubble. They cannot be realized in a bubble. The society belongs to all of us. So one of the things that I often talk to my teams and the communities, one of the things that we talk about is an exercise that we do is a life journey exercise, in which, young people recount their journeys, and places where they felt discriminated against. So, for example, I would like to talk here a little bit about the passage of age of marriage bill in Pakistan. I was a part of that when I used to work in Shirkatgah, and we did a power mapping exercise where the young people in Jacobabad and Mityari, focus groups with male youth, young youth, and what we found out in that power mapping is that both young men and young women are on the lower rungs of the society. The young women, of course, being or adolescent women, girls, being, of course, at the lowest rung, but the young men did not feature very high also. Why? Because gender norms, they pose expectations both to men and women. And these gender norms then shape the masculinities, that our young men eventually shape into or aspire towards. So how can we change that? And that's called gender transformation, right? And one of the programs that Pathfinder does across the world are taking gender transformative approaches towards that. So asking a young person or a young man, what does it mean to be human? Or what was the first time when you felt you wanted to do something, but you felt some bias or privilege, a power walk kind of an exercise, And many times young men themselves realize that the challenges that girls face, that women face are different, but also same at a human level, One of the exercises that we do at Pathfinder, once again in all our programs, is interspousal communication or gender talks, where young girls and boys from the community sit together, They talk about their experiences. So in jargon, you would call that gender transformative action.
All right. Thanks for teaching us a little bit about that. I've learned something new today.
Yeah.
What drives your personal optimism for Pakistan?
As I said, my personal optimism is drawn from children, from young people. It is drawn from my own children also, by the way, who sometimes come home and they surprise me by their new take on things, and their consciousness of their privilege, and the conversations they are having at school. I think young people in Pakistan have so much to give, and as an older generation, it is our responsibility to provide them with those opportunities for self-realization. That gives me positivity. Another thing that gives me positivity is the women of Pakistan. More and more I see women shining in different fields, being confident. I feel some of us women, we ride on the shoulders of the women who started the movement for women's rights in Pakistan. You and I and many of the women who sit in Pakistan and are doing innovative work or are in leadership positions right now, we've all ridden on the shoulders of the women who started this movement.
Absolutely. We, respect to our foremothers. Yeah, we would not be here had they not made the space for us. Yeah. And hopefully we can give that space back to the future generations.
Yeah, there is no other way, I feel. That has to happen. It has to be a cycle. It has to be a process. And it has to be dissociated from personal ego, and both can go. Self-fulfillment can happen while you're fulfilling others. You can elevate and uplift yourself while you're elevating and uplifting others.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here in the studio, Tabinda. It's been great chatting with you. As I told you already, I've learned something new myself today in our conversation.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here. I wish VCast team the best, I saw some of your videos and I thought they were very inspiring, and a new channel in Pakistan, of motivating people. So I was looking at those videos and getting very inspired. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much. All right, thank you for joining us here at VCast Studio with Naveen Naqvi. If you like the program, then like, share and subscribe.